All right, so I'm gonna play this. I'm gonna play this Obama. This is Obama. He was speaking when he spoke at Morehouse, and I want you to hear what he was saying to these black men, right? And I want to get your take on it, P. Ray.
I understand there's a common fraternity creed here at Morehouse. Excuses are tools of the incompetent, used to build bridges to nowhere and monuments of nothingness. Well, we've got no time for excuses. Not because the bitter legacy of slavery and segregation have vanished entirely, they have not. Not because racism and discrimination no longer exist. We know those are still out there. It's just that in today's hyper-connected, hyper-competitive world with millions of young people from China and India and Brazil, many of whom started with a whole lot less than all of you did, all of them entering the global workforce alongside you, nobody is going to give you anything that you have not earned. Nobody cares how tough your upbringing was. Nobody cares if you suffered some discrimination.
So I want to get your take on that because he's full of shit. But
first off, there's no us. There's no we. He is a Kenyan Irishman. He has nothing to do with the Negro whatsoever. Not even a little bit. So in that case, in that sense, I find his pandering extremely offensive. However, one thing that I say to students all the time is that your competition is in Singapore, and that there are children at my school in Senegal who speak 5 languages fluently, who can write Arabic fluently, who know their timetables when they're 6 years old. How is your child 10 years old that they don't know how to count? Like, at some point, we have to put it through our heads that we are competing in a global market. And because I've worked abroad in these foreign markets, I can tell you they are churning out some great students. Like, even with me, I'm planning on moving back to Senegal so that my child can go back to my school when she's in high school as a foreign exchange student. So I know that this works because I've seen it with my own 2 eyes. We have teachers unions right now in the city of Chicago, the Chicago Teachers Union. They are doing their budget negotiations. What they're pushing for is housing for illegals. They're pushing for sanctuary schools, and they're pushing for gender affirmation counselors in every school. They're not talking about the fact that math proficiency is 8%. They're not talking about the fact that reading proficiency sits at 11%, because the teachers, in my opinion, not all of them, but the culture of teaching has been more focused on social emotional learning and not academics itself. And we have emotionally confused children who cannot read, write, or count. Like, at some point, we gotta keep it a buck. And I know, because again, I have an 8th grader, that I take her education extremely seriously, because I understand that my family, my mama is first generation off Chula, Mississippi cotton fields, the poorest town, the poorest state in the United States of America. My grandmother, my grandfather were there. My auntie and my mother both have doctorate degrees. Want to know why? Because they went to school, they got their lesson, and they came on home. That's the rule of the family. Go to school, get your lesson, come home so you can get you a good job and take care of the family. And we've been able to do that. It's why we've been able to hold on to the little bit that we got in this country. And I'm saying, we got to, as a people, we got to start pushing ourselves harder. We got to stop saying college is not for everybody. They only telling your black ass that. That's it. That's nobody else is saying that to their kids. Or they're saying that it's okay. My child came home with a 2.7 GPA. He tried. No, he didn't. At some point, again, we gotta put the fear of learning back in our children, because one thing that I learned from working at the Islamic school is Iqra. Iqra is the first word of the Quran, and it literally means learn or read. So they take learning as a spiritual endeavor, whereas in Judeo-Christian, it's forgiveness. So if you don't get it the first time, oh, that's okay, you'll try it again. No, over there, you're going to either get your lesson or you're going to hell. So they have a different type of motivation to learn, and we got to put that in our own kids. But it does not give foreigners like Vivek the opportunity to come and disrespect us either.
Well, I will say this, because I agree with you to a certain extent. You don't have headphones?
Do you? No, I'm sorry. Is it too much of an echo?
When I talk, I'm just gonna mute. Listen. And then too, I'm using StreamYard, so it's always a little off. But anyway, I will say this because I agree to what you were saying to a certain extent. Where I will push back a little is our nation stopped investing in our children in the education system. They just stopped. There are a lot of things that used to be taught in school. Okay, they don't want to teach cursive. It's not like the kids don't want to learn it. They're not being taught it anymore. They took civics out of the school. So there's a lot of things that they're taking out of the school. And I do agree with the Trump administration to really eliminate the public school system, right? And kind of privatize it, however, our whole way of how we educate, whether it's from kindergarten all through college, needs to be turned upside down. Now, Vivek tried to pull back and saying, well, the H-1B visa programs needs to be gutted and rebuilt to make it better because it's somewhat being enforced like indentured servants. But at the same time, you want to sit up here and say the problem is culture. Their culture in India is better than American culture. So he's double talking, and that is the problem that I'm having. But the underlying is the education starts at home with the parents. That's where it starts at. And our state, our city, our county, and our federal government needs to reinvest in education, in science, in space, i.e. NASA, in medicine. They're not doing that. They are not doing that. But this previous administration that is leaving opened up the border and gave all these wonderful resources to illegals that should have went to Americans, and that would have helped, especially children, get a better education, become innovative, produce more jobs. So I agree with what you're saying, but then the other half is it's a lot of BS when it comes to these billionaires and politicians because they're lying in our faces. And then you have these people such as Vivek disrespecting American culture. It's not even a black thing, it's an American thing. Foreigners are not better. I would say one thing that foreigners have over Americans, they have that immigrant hustle, because either you come here and you make something happen or your ass gonna go back home, and it's worse where you're coming from. But if they're so great and so wonderful and so educated and have the best culture, why are you not making your own country great?
So that's the thing. They take their best. They bring their best over here to look down on our worst. That's the whole thing about it. And I'm not blaming the children for not knowing how to read. They're going to school every day. So it's not their fault. But what I'm saying is, for instance, I'll give you a better example. We'll put it on a larger paradigm. So I worked at ICRA, which is my school. But then I also worked at the International School of Dakar, which is like the Western Embassy School. This is like where the president of the Republic sent his child, the American ambassador, French ambassador, all their children go there, along with the Western NGOs. So I was like the 4th grade teaching assistant there. When I was there, the children didn't know how to multiply in the 4th grade. They did not know how to do it. I gave them the 1-minute multiplication test, and I think my highest score was like a 72. And so I said, okay, guys, we got to get our multiplication together. So we're going to do what's called a recess pass. We get 2 recesses. If you go and you write your multiplication at night, you'll give me that paper, and that'll be your recess pass, and then you can go to recess. But if you don't, you stay in, you write your multiplication, and then everyone can go to second recess. So I get some dice, I would roll the dice, whatever number I threw, they would have to write that number up to 12 5 times. Do you know that these parents came up to the school, Miss Dana, and were pissed? Okay, very, very upset that I was making their children write their multiplication tables every night. This is too much stress for them. They already have other homework. My child didn't do well on the 1-minute multiplication test because they just can't write that fast, and they don't know how to think that fast, and you're stressing them out. You're making them try too hard. The children didn't have a problem with it. It was the mamas and the daddies, because they are focused too much on the social and emotional aspect of their children, and they're not focused enough on the academics. Whereas on the flip side, at the Islamic school, where if I was to tell those kids to write those tables 5 times, their parents would have sent me back 10. You see, because they have a different mentality about learning. The Western learning system, again, is not what it needs to be. But again, Vivek does not get to, let me go back. The Western learning system, again, is focused on social emotional learning. And I've been saying this for years. If you look at the data of like the reading and math skills from the time they started social emotional learning, which was during the Obama administration with Common Core, you're going to see a very steep decline in this because you're taking time away from academics to focus on things that are not the function of the school. The schools have gotten way out of order and way out of line from what they're supposed to be. Now, I'm a proud Chicago public school graduate. My parents met at the Chicago public schools and they're public school graduates. We would have nothing without the Chicago public schools. So I know for a fact that the schools work well. However, this new culture that does not teach the children to write their multiplication, that does not teach the children how to write in cursive, that's not forcing them to critically think, that's not giving them vocab homework every night, they are failing. I think about my neighborhood. We got 3 high schools over here. Do you know that all of the high schools have 0% reading proficiency, 0% math proficiency? I've been screaming to the people, y'all, this is an issue because in 10 years, these illiterate children who cannot count will be adults in the neighborhood. What type of wealth are they going to bring back to us? How are they going to contribute to our tax base? So we got to get back in the schools and demand that they teach our students like they were doing in the 90s and get out of their feelings. We don't care. Let the mom and the daddy deal with the feelings. But the teacher is like I said, distracted right now. They want to teach them how to dig in their bodies. They want to tell them you're not a girl or a boy. They want to tell them it's okay. I'm going to keep your secret from your parent. But the whole time you're not teaching them anything, nothing that's transferable that's going to make them competitive in this global market.
No, I hear you. Like I said, this conversation, I'm going to do more content on it so I could do more of a deep dive as to what is exactly H-1B visa. Again, this was created under President George Bush the first. And that was the Immigration Act of 1990 where they introduced it. And I said it before, Obama popularized it. Trump kept it going. And it looks like with this second term of his, he's going to go full-fledged because he got Elon and Vivek all up in his ear. But I think they're going to end up having a clash after January 20th. So I want to get to real quick the New Orleans tragedy, right? You heard about that, right? It was yesterday in New Orleans.
Dana with the data. Dana with the data.